Greetings, salutations, respect, and love. Hey, I'm Scott, and you are in the Prog Corner. Hey, today we're going to be talking about a classic album that turns 50 years old this year. Actually turns 50 on October 3rd, but I didn't want to wait that long. Jennifer Allen, one of the great subscribers here at the Prog Corner, had requested that I do a review of Selling England by the Pound as if I had never heard it before. Well, that's not going to happen. I've heard it a million times, so I can't fake it like that. That's why I don't do reaction videos. I keep it real up in the Proud Corner, y'all. Anyway, 1973, England was involved in all kinds of turmoil. You had strikes and inflation and unemployment, and you had all kinds of debate about whether or not to join the European Union or not. So there was a whole lot of stuff, a lot of background going on. Genesis had just returned from their Foxtrot tour where they had actually toured America a little bit. So the thinking was, let's do an album for the American market. Well, you couldn't find one more Eurocentric or British-centric than Selling England by the Pound. Even the name tells you everything you need to know about it. This thing is chock full of British lore and legends and, references that Americans really couldn't understand. Now, I bought this thing in a record store in the Virgin Islands in probably 1977. So it was maybe 78. Yeah, I think it was 78 when I finally bought it. But my introduction to Genesis was Genesis Live. And then I went ahead and bought Foxtrot, Nursery Crime, went back and got Trespass. And then I got The Lamb and Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering. So this was my last Peter Gabriel record that I owned. So I knew all those records. So Selling England, really, man, I was so looking forward to it. And how did I feel about it? Well, I didn't feel great about it, actually. I liked it, but I didn't love it at first. John Burns' production is fantastic, but I kind of miss almost how amateur Genesis was on Nursery Crime and Foxtrot. You could tell they didn't have that big budget. Even the album covers, the artwork, it was great, but Selling England just was a step up in every conceivable way. It sounded better. It looked better. They had a bigger budget. It actually charted. It had a hit. So this is really where Genesis's upward trajectory really started, was on this album. The producer, John Burns, had worked with Genesis on Foxtrot, but he showed up late. So this was the first one where he had been with them from the beginning, and it really shows. There's a cohesiveness to this album missing from the earlier records, and I just love it. John Burns had worked with all kinds of great bands, so he knew what he was doing in the studio. He'd worked with Jethro Tull and Traffic and T-Rex and Deep Purple, so he was no rookie. He knew what time it was. The album starts off with Dancing with a Moonlit Night, which is, it starts with Peter and his a cappella thing. He's doing the Britannia thing, and it really sets the tone for the entire album. It's a little somber. It's a little dour. It tells the story of Britain's fall from greatness and their descent into consumerism. This first song, the lyrics were written by Peter Gabriel in what would be the norm for The Lamb, but in the past, it was always more of a group effort. Musically, this is all five of them, and you can really tell they all have a whole bunch to contribute to this song. My only complaint about this song is the last 3 minutes, that little ambient thing going on. It just goes on too long, and it makes me just beg for the next song to start, which was their very first hit. I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe actually hit the top 40 in the UK. This song was developed basically from the album cover artwork, in which Betty Swanwick, I guess, was commissioned to do new art, but the deadline was coming up too fast, so they had to use one of her existing paintings, and she just put a lawnmower on there. But it's a cool song that was originally developed by Steve, and Peter did the lyrics. Tony and Peter also helped with the music. It's a good song. It's all right. You got to have a hit in there somewhere. Next up, Fifth of Firth. Come on, man. This is such a great track. Starts with that great Tony piano intro, which for years I thought Genesis dropped from their 1973 tour because Tony kept flubbing it. I had just been corrected about that. They actually kept the piano intro in all through the Selling England tour, both parts of it, the white tour and the black tour, even though Tony kept flubbing it up. Clearly, this is a Tony song. Lyrics written by Mike and Tony. You know, you get all kinds of different references to the ocean and stuff like that. I really don't understand what it's about, but it's really cool. And then you've got that amazing Steve Hackett guitar solo, which some people feel is amongst the greatest guitar solos of all time. Certainly one of the great Genesis moments. Absolutely. Some people feel side one should have ended right there because you get More Fool Me closes out side A. And honestly, Selling England is almost 54 minutes long, which for a single album in 73 was super long. So if they wanted to have gotten rid of More Fool Me, they certainly could have. But the producer, John Burns, was absolutely adamant that this be the side closer. It's the second song Phil got to sing lead vocals on with Genesis, and I think it's a lovely track. I really like it, written by Mike and Phil. It's just great. It's a great tune. I really like it a lot. Side 2 starts with my favorite song on the album. I always loved the Battle of Epping Forest, and I still do. Being a contrarian, I guess, is probably where this opinion comes from. Everybody seems to think it's too verbose and that Peter just wrote too many lyrics and he was stepping all over the instrumentation on this record. Poppycock. That's nonsense. The lyrics are great here. You know, I bought this thing on cassette in the Virgin Islands, so it had no lyric sheet. I don't know if that helped or hindered my appreciation for it, because a lot of these references are just so British and so English and so over my head, but I just love it. I think it's a great song. To me, it's kind of like if Harold the Barrel were exploded out into a 10-minute track. Just great. Next up is another one of the controversial entries to the set list here, and that is After the Ordeal, a song written by Steve and Mike. Apparently, on the steps out front of Island Studios, they wrote this thing, and it's a beautiful instrumental piece. I do love it. I think it's great, and I think it's really important to set something off between the Battle of Epping Forest and what comes next, which is, of course, the great and powerful cinema show. For a lot of people, Genesis's finest moment. I would disagree with that, primarily because where the heck is Steve Hackett on this track, man? I love Cinema Show. It's so great. I love how they morph the story of Romeo and Juliet with the father Tiresias and the idea that there's more land than sea. It's just really great wordplay from Tony and Mike, who wrote the lyrics on this. And I guess Phil helped out with the music on this track. Just great. But it's not really a great standalone track because you absolutely need to have Isle of Plenty to round the album out. Not only does it make Cinema Show make sense, because without it, it just stops and is just ridiculous. But it makes the whole album make sense because it brings back, Dancing with the Moonlit Night. And it gives Peter a chance to fire off some more salvos against consumerism as he names off, food products and supermarkets and pricing and stuff like that. And the album's over, and you're left scratching your head saying, do I like this thing as much as Foxtrot? That was me at 15, 16 years old. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I find that it's the best sounding Genesis album. John Burns did an amazing job. Tony had bought some new keyboards, so he's got some new synth sounds going on. And there's definitely a maturity to the band that was lacking with Nursery Crime and Foxtrot. And there are so many things within Selling England by the Pound which act as kind of like a springboard to what they would do later on, from a hit single to some of the more jazz-inflected things to some of the, more improv things. You would hear echoes of this in later albums. It's just a phenomenal record. How do I score Selling England by the Pound? Well, come on, people. We're talking about Peter Gabriel era Genesis here, so yeah, it might not be my favorite Genesis album. That will always be The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway for me personally, but I can certainly understand why it rates as the second best album in the history of prog over on Prog Archives, only close to the edge, pips it by a couple of percentage points. So clearly, a lot of people view this as the finest thing Genesis ever did. I disagree, but not by much. So I'm giving this 5 headphones. It's a perfect album. You know it is. You know it's absolutely amazing. All the future of Genesis is all wrapped up in here, from the hit singles to Steve Hackett's discontent with the amount of material he was getting put onto their records. It's all right there, all in one album. And yeah, I love it. I give it a perfect score. And is this going to be an ongoing thing? Are we going to go back and start looking at classic albums and rate them? Yeah, why not? That sounds like a lot of fun to me. I love doing new album reviews, but I love talking about the classics too. But anyway, Selling England by the Pound, boys and girls, such an amazing album. Genesis, such an amazing band. Yeah. Anyway, I love you guys. I hope you have a great week. I will see you soon. And just remember to prog on, my friends. Prog on. Yes, God save the king.